You have heard it 1,000 times. A low rumble in the distance, then a crack so loud it shakes the walls. You know exactly what it is. You learned it in school. Water vapor, electrical charge, the rapid expansion of heated air, a perfectly explainable, natural event. And still, for just a fraction of a second, something in you flinches. Something older than your education kicks in and says, "Pay attention, something is out there." That flinch is not a mistake. It is a memory, and it is far older than you think. Go back 50,000 years. No schools, no science, no word for electricity. You are standing at the edge of a forest on an open plain, and the sky above you turns the color of a bruise. The air changes. You feel it on your skin before you hear anything at all. A strange pressure, a stillness that feels wrong. Then the sound hits. A crack so enormous it has no comparison in your entire life. Nothing you have ever heard has prepared you for it. And then the light. A white split opening in the sky itself, branching downward like a burning tree. Like a hand reaching from somewhere above into the world below and touching it. What would you think? Not what would you know. What would you think in the deepest, most instinctive part of your mind in that first half second before any reasoning could begin? Something is speaking. This is not a primitive conclusion. It is actually the most logical conclusion available to a mind with no other framework. Sound requires a source. The biggest sound you have ever heard in your entire life requires the biggest source you can imagine. And the biggest thing you can imagine is something larger than the world itself. Something outside it, something that apparently has something to say. Something that apparently is paying attention to the same world you live in. Researchers who studied the cognitive origins of religion, including Pascal Boyer at Washington University, have found that the human brain has a deeply wired tendency to detect agency, to assume that things that move, make sound, or cause change are caused by something with intent. Scientists call this the hypersensitive agency detection device. It evolved for a very specific and very good reason. If you hear a rustle in the bushes and assume it is just the wind, you are right 99 times out of 100. But the one time it is a predator and you assume wrong, that assumption costs you everything. So your brain evolved to always assume agency. Always assume something intended that. Always assume someone is there. The cost of being wrong in one direction is embarrassment. The cost of being wrong in the other direction is death. Thunder was not a riddle your ancestors failed to solve. It was the most powerful possible signal their agency-detecting brains could ever receive. An enormous invisible sound from an invisible source, accompanied by light that moved like a living thing, followed by rain that could save a dying crop or flood an entire river valley in hours. Of course, it meant something. Of course, something sent it. Of course, something was behind it. The only question worth asking was what that something wanted. And so your ancestors began to answer. Across every culture on Earth, independently, without contact, without shared language, without any way to have compared notes across oceans and centuries, the sky became a place where something lived. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was Enlil, lord of wind and storm, whose voice was the thunder and whose anger could flatten cities to rubble. In ancient Greece, it was Zeus, king of the gods, hurling lightning bolts from Olympus like weapons aimed with precision. In Norse mythology, it was Thor, whose hammer Mjolnir, striking against the anvil of the sky, sent thunder rolling across all 9 worlds. In Yoruba tradition, it was Shango, god of thunder and lightning, whose double-headed axe split the clouds and whose justice was absolute. In the beliefs of the Lakota people of North America, it was the Thunderbirds, enormous supernatural creatures whose wing beats were the thunder and whose eyes flashed the lightning. Different continents, different languages, different centuries, the same sky, the same sound, the same conclusion. Something is up there. It is powerful beyond anything we can match, and it is watching. Psychologist Ara Norenzayan at the University of British Columbia has spent years studying what he calls big gods, powerful supernatural beings who monitor human behavior, who care about what humans do and punish what they find wrong. His research finds that belief in such beings appears independently across human cultures at a rate that cannot be explained by coincidence or by cultural contact alone. Something in the architecture of the human mind, when confronted with overwhelming power it cannot control and cannot predict, reaches naturally and almost automatically toward the idea of a being who wields that power with intention, a mind behind the force, a will behind the storm. Thunder was the original evidence, the loudest thing a human being could hear, the most dramatic visual event available in the natural world, and completely, utterly, terrifyingly outside human control. You could not stop it, you could not reliably predict it, you could not negotiate with it the way you could negotiate with a rival or reason with an animal. You could not outrun it, or outsmart it, or hide from it effectively. All you could do was stand in it and watch and wonder and try to understand what you had done to bring it or what you might do differently to bring less of it next time. This is where ritual was born. Not from confusion, not from ignorance, from logic. From the same logical instinct that says, if this has a cause and the cause has a mind, then the mind can potentially be reached. Offerings can be made, behavior can be changed, prayers can be sent upward into the charged air, and maybe something up there will receive them. The moment your ancestor made the first offering to the storm, a piece of food placed at the edge of the field, a carved figure held up toward the clouds, words spoken into the wind with a desperate hope that they would land us somewhere, they were doing something extraordinarily and uniquely human. They were trying to open a conversation with the universe itself. You still do this. Perhaps not with offerings or altars, but every time something terrible happens and your first instinct is to ask, why? Why me? Why now? Why this of all things? You are running the same ancient program, the assumption that events have authors, that suffering is not random, but directed, that somewhere behind the chaos there is an intention that can, if you are patient and honest and searching enough, eventually be understood. Cognitive scientist Justin Barrett calls this intuitive theism, the natural default tendency of the human mind to interpret the world as designed, authored, and purposeful. It does not require teaching. It does not require a religious tradition passed down through generations. It emerges spontaneously in children as young as 3 years old, who independently describe natural phenomena as made for a purpose, created by someone, intended to mean something. Your ancestors standing on that open plain 50,000 years ago, watching the sky tear itself open above them, was not making an error. They were running the most sophisticated software their brain had. They were doing exactly what your brain still does today in the first half second before your education catches up. They were asking the oldest and most stubbornly human question there is. Who is doing this? And the storm answered the only way it could, with more thunder rolling across the dark, with more light splitting the clouds from somewhere above, with rain falling cold and heavy on the upturned faces of people who had never heard of Zeus or Thor or Shango, but who felt in the oldest and most unshakable chamber of themselves that the sky was trying to say something they had not yet learned to hear. Tonight, if a storm rolls in and the thunder cracks your windows in their frames, pay attention to what happens in the very first half second before you think about water vapor, before you remember anything you were taught. Notice the flinch. Notice where your eyes go. Notice the part of you that looks up. That part has been looking up for 50,000 years. And it has never entirely stopped believing something is there.